Hi, good evening, everyone. Please give us a couple of minutes. We'll start. Thank you for joining. As always, this is an interactive webinar. We are very keen that you ask all the questions that you want to. Please put them in the chat box and we'll be happy to answer them. Hi, Nikhil. Welcome. Is it raining in Bangalore or Goa, wherever you are?
Hey, Seema. Hi. Nice to see you. Hey, everyone. Good evening. Yeah, it's raining a lot. I'm currently in Goa, so it is raining a lot. What about you? Is it raining in Delhi?
Yeah. It's just started raining in the evening. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to get back home on time, but I did. All right. So our topic today really is the product manager in the age of AI. And I don't know what the fuss is all about. Is it really such a big deal? I mean, is the product manager's role really going to change that much? And why is everyone so sort of, curious and interested in knowing what the product manager will do? But before we begin this, Nikhil, maybe a little bit of introduction to yourself and why, someone like you should be talking about a topic like this. And also a little about, the accelerated management program, which is currently recruiting for its fourth cohort. We are very keen to sort of update our product curriculum as we go along, and we are hoping that you will be teaching also in the next cohort. So why is this so critical? And tell us a little about yourself before we begin.
Sure. Thanks, Seema. Thanks again for having me. So hi, everyone. My name is Nikhil. I've basically been working in education for the last 15 or so years. So I've been lucky to have found my passion very early on in life. And I've sort of spent a lot of time across education verticals, K-12, higher ed, and workplace learning. And as part of that, have worked in roles across business, product, operations, and so on. And as part of this journey, I certainly resonated a lot more with the product function. And a lot of my work has been in innovating in the learning product space, which is essentially creating new products for new learning experiences and trying to scale that. So through my lens in education, I got really interested in the whole product management field. And that's essentially how I actually got into it. Just a disclaimer, I'm not an AI expert, so I won't be able to answer any technical questions, but it's more a passion for product management. I think the other piece is that I've certainly found a lot of value in being able to learn online. So I'm very curious about technology and very curious about even the history of technology, and that's what got me interested in just reading a lot about AI and what was happening there. So I thought this was an interesting opportunity to connect the dots between product managers and AI and see where the field is sort of evolving.
Okay, so back to my question. Really, will the product manager's role change significantly with AI coming in?
So I think product management, is one of those functions which is very closely tied to technology, right? It's actually a function that has evolved significantly over the time when it started sort of many years ago. The first sort of product management role was with Hewlett-Packard almost 50 years ago, when the function there was what they were supposed to do as product managers, very different. A new age sort of aspect of product management has obviously evolved with things like social media, cloud, mobile, etc. coming in. So I certainly do expect the role of the product manager to change, considering we're sitting on one of the most transformative technologies in the world, which is artificial intelligence, right? I think there are some aspects of the product manager's role which will not change, but will in fact become much more stronger, right? So for example, with AI now, there's so much more sort of technical ability that one can do, so much of data crunching that can happen, so much of, to some degree, even coding that some of these tools can do. So I think one of the big sort of things that product managers are going to be critically responsible for is really getting deeper with their customers, right? So some of those skills of understanding customers, understanding industries, figuring out the real business case for solving AI related problems. Those are some of the skills that are going to sort of take precedence. I think the other thing that's going to sort of be important is AI is in some ways a little more technical as a domain. So the need for product managers to kind of build their technical muscle or technical understanding is certainly going to increase, especially considering there's so much choice out there in terms of how to think about which AI technology to use. So I think that's the second trend that I see happening. And I think the third is, the role of design, right? Like, I think fundamentally human beings are the same, right? The aspects of human behavior and how customers think and purchase, and how to think about their problems in some ways remains the same. So bringing being able to take a technology like AI and making it very seamless and user friendly and easy to understand for consumers is going to play a big role, right? So the aspect of design as a product manager's skill set or toolkit is going to significantly evolve, right? So I think those are three sort of points around how PMs are going to have to rethink or change the way they approach their work with AI.
So what you're really saying is that a product manager will now have to be much more of a business person, will now have to understand customer service much more. And of course, technical was one thing that they were expected, or most people think that product managers must have technical skills. So what you're now saying is that if they don't have technical skills, they should learn to develop that as well, because that all those three things become important.
Yeah, I think a strong technical understanding, right? And I've put together a small presentation, so I'm happy to kind of walk you through some of this to give you a sense of where AI currently is today and, how PM should think about that. So is this a good time, Seema, for me to
give me a second. I'll just allow screen share. And everyone, please don't put questions in the chat. It's much easier if you put it in the Q&A. We can see it more easily. Otherwise, in the chat, it gets lost. I think somebody has just put a question there. If you can just, put it in chat, we'll take it up as we go along. All right, all yours, Nikhil.
Okay, super. So let me know if you can see my screen. Yeah, okay, super. So, just starting with some context, right? Like IBM has done a study on, how different roles are sort of interacting with AI, and they've come to the conclusion that, product managers, one of the 10 sort of user groups who are actually sort of using AI, and they claim that about 20 to 25% of PMs are already using AI every day, right? And that's a no-brainer, obviously, because of these large language models like ChatGPT becoming available for all of us. It's a no-brainer that so many of us are already kind of using this, and PMs being that. I think there was obviously another prediction that was made that eventually all product managers will eventually become AI product managers. And this was an interesting quote by Marilee Nika from Meta. And there's a fantastic podcast that's available on product management and AI. And I highly recommend people to kind of go through this. But what I can do is maybe just walk you first through the current state of AI, right? Let's just take a look at where AI really is and what that sort of means for product managers. As part of this, we'll also cover a little bit of what we call the between times, where while we see AI really accelerating, in some ways it's actually not accelerating as much. And this is similar to what happened with electricity, almost 100 years ago. And so it's important for PMs to think about some of this as they, think about this this industry. And of course, some of the challenges that industries are facing with AI, which I think are opportunities for product managers to kind of leverage as they move ahead, right? So obviously, this is taken from a bunch of reports. This is taken from the report done by Stanford University on the state of AI. And as you can see that there's a significant increase in the knowledge of AI right now, right? There's almost a 10-fold increase over the last 20 years on the number of journals, the number of research, and the number of scientific material that's sort of out there. And what you can see, and sorry, I think the graphs are not as big, but you can see in one of them, maybe the one at the bottom, there is India also sort of in that list, right? So there is an interesting amount of research also being done in India that is being cited across the world, right? I think the second is that as part of this aspect of research, well, about 40, 50 years ago, a lot of this research was done by academia, right? Which was, institutions and universities. But a lot of this research today is being done by companies and industry, right? And this is, of course, specific to, a certain sort of aspect of AI. But that's the other thing that we're seeing, that companies, because they're actually using a lot of AI models, are the ones actually creating a lot of this research. AI is getting a lot more nuanced, right? And you can see on the left-hand side, there's so much that AI is just one sort of idea, but there's so many different aspects to it, whether it's thinking about language, thinking about, vision, thinking about speech, thinking about robotics, and so on and so forth, right? So there's nuances to how to think about technology in AI. And as a product manager, it's, I guess, important to understand which is the field that you're really interested in within the AI spectrum. On the right, you can see that obviously AI becomes a lot more smarter, and that sort of comes across in this graph, which talks about the number of parameters, right? The ability for AI to actually connect the dots, literally like the way our brain works, to be able to connect the dots across different kinds of data, that's really increased, right? So the fact that it's becoming much more nuanced and much more advanced. India is actually a big hub for talent, and this is more on the engineering side. As you can see, that just the number of projects that people are doing on GitHub, the skill penetration with respect to AI, obviously that's also with respect to our large population. But as a hub, India is certainly becoming a strong hub with AI, maybe like the IT sort of industry was 20 years ago. Product managers in some ways are kind of sandwiched between this. So this is essentially data from McKinsey, which talks about hiring, right? So obviously, from a hiring standpoint, it's still data engineers, software engineers, data scientists that are actually currently in demand. There's obviously a significant increase in demand for designers, as you can see, and product managers are somewhere in between, right? They're not as sort of not as in demand as, let's say, the engineers, but almost in the same sort of vein as designers, right? So this is an interesting sort of point to be in, which is that one of the things that PMs will have to start doing is really being able to grasp all the knowledge that's out there, right? So literally having a learning to learn mindset and figuring out which are the scientific journals to go through, because each AI technology is different, each use case is different, each model is different, right? So the second is obviously getting hands-on with the technology to really understand the kinds of systems. There's so much being talked about, with respect to the cost that it would take to deploy these technologies, the aspect related to security, privacy, ethics. So there's so much more than just creating a product from a customer standpoint, right? There's so many nuances to it that PMs will have to sort of grasp their head around, and of course the need to much more in a stronger way really collaborate with the engineers and designers, right, to put together a user experience that will really matter for consumers, right? So I'll just pause here before I maybe go into the next part. But
yeah. Interestingly, you said ethics. What does product manager have to do with ethics?
Right.
Isn't that the lawyer's role or somebody else's role? Why does a product manager suddenly have to worry about ethics?
Well, because essentially there's also, AI is a little bit of a strange technology, which is obviously the fact that it's a technology through which you train it through data, and through that data, it has the ability to, create these predictions and output for us, right? So things like ethics become important because what kind of data is the AI technology being trained on? What are the kinds of biases that are already in the system, which this technology is taking into consideration and deploying outputs, right? What is the kind of privacy related to the data that's currently out there for people to consider before they jump into an AI technology, right? So all of these considerations are something that any company needs to consider. And obviously, if the product manager is at the center of business, technology, and design, thinking about this use case for AI, there is a strong consideration to think about ethics as well in this whole piece.
Interesting. There is a question. Is this a good time to take that question now? This is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was somebody called Anirbit Datta. He had asked this question. He wants to know of the co-pilots released by Microsoft, which is Bing, GitHub, Windows, Viva, SharePoint, Teams. Which one is most relevant for PMs to leverage in their day-to-day work?
Right. So I think this is, this really depends on the kind of work that you are doing. All of them right now kind of are have their own sort of aspects to the kind of models that they've been trained on. So I don't have a point of view on any one particular sort of copilot, as long as it's a tool that's kind of helping you with the existing tools you're already on and the work that you need to get done, right? So elements to do with data analysis, elements to do with putting roadmaps together, and so on. So I mean, don't have a preference, but anything that you feel is more comfortable based on the one that the existing tools that you're currently using.
Okay, I think someone's thrown up a question from AI. This is how can product managers ensure that AI-driven products and systems are designed and developed with strong emphasis on ethical considerations and prioritize the well-being and safety of users in the context of human-computer interaction? AI, as someone's actually gone through that chat GPT or whatever it is and put a question there and then had AI ask you the same question.
Right. So let me just see if I can go back to my slides. There's definitely one slide I had on ethics. Okay, I can't find that. Okay, so I think sorry, what was the question again related to ethics, right?
The AI itself wants to know how product managers can sort of, make sure that they are prioritizing safety and well-being of users in the context of human and computer interaction. The question is in chat. It's a very
I missed that.
Ambiguous question that only AI can ask, but happy to sort of see if you can take a shot. Meanwhile, I'm quickly putting the question in AI and seeing if it is going to give you an answer.
Yeah, so I guess we're still far away from what they call AGI, artificial general intelligence. So there are certain skills that we as human beings have with respect to our core humanness, and those are things that obviously AI can't really replicate right now. But I think on a serious note, I think it boils down to a lot of things related to the data, right? Like there's so much. And this is, and we'll talk a little bit about how this is related to electricity, but companies that actually have all of the data or have the relevant data for which they're building models for certain use cases are the ones that are really moving forward. But how does one think about what is this data that currently exists? What are the biases in this data? Who are the human beings that were already sort of using this before? There's this whole aspect of AI technologies generating data, which goes back into an AI technology generating more data, right? So we're living in a bit of a strange world where there is certainly a need for a lot more thinking around regulation and I mean, not just ethics, but regulation on how people are using data to build these use cases.
We also keep talking about how product managers now will have to be very, very focused on data and not just analysis, but how it's collected, how it's used, how it's dispersed, how it's, making sense to make better decisions. So do you think that's another skill that product managers will have to pick up, and they can't just say, I am a technical one, so I only know that? Or will you again have, last time we had talked, you said there is differentiation in kind of product managers. Will that also happen now?
So let me just share my screen. There's definitely one thing that I wanted to share with everybody, which is, and we'll talk about this a little bit, but what's really happening with AI is really that at the heart of it, AI is what we call a prediction technology, right? So what is prediction? Prediction is really the ability to, using information that you have to get information that you want, right? So if you think about a human decision, right? Any decision that you make, let's say I want to choose physics in grade 10, or I want to choose math in grade 10, right? Let's assume that's the decision that you make. This decision essentially consists of a prediction, which is what is the likelihood that you will be successful if you choose math, or what is the likelihood that you will be successful if you choose physics. And there is the aspect of human judgment, right? Which is really, okay, what are the outcomes if I take physics or math, or what are my personal experiences or interests related to physics or math, right? So what's really happening is that because of AI, the prediction part of decision making is actually taken out, right? Essentially, because now the technology is able to actually give very high predictability on what's possible. And this is only possible in certain industries right now, where this kind of prediction was already taking place, right? So for example, in an industry like education, this doesn't exist because there is no data available for prediction of how students think about subjects or what subjects would be relevant, right? But this is very much the case in finance where data exists, or very much the case in medicine where this has already been happening. So, so that's on the prediction side, right? Now, the aspect that can't be replaced is obviously human judgment, right? And that's really where human beings come in and decide, okay, based on the likelihood of option A or option B, then how does one take this specific decision, right? So I think to your question on data, I think the ability to handle data, the ability for the technology to predict the data is actually, there, right? In fact, it's going up. But how does one make sense of that data, or how does one sort of take decisions with respect to that data is something that obviously the technology can't do right now, right? So I think that's one point to your answer. I think the other big aspect is this moving from rules to decisions, right? And there's a fantastic book called Power and Prediction, and I highly recommend people to read that. And this talks about how AI is actually much more useful in situations where we have to make decisions. And it goes back to the fact that because a decision is really where there's uncertainty, and prediction matters in that kind of situation, right? So if you think of education, right? In education, there's so many rules. Every child should study, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Every child should study based on their age. Children should study based on grades. These are rules, right? I mean, these were rules that were set up 100 years ago. So the ability for this technology to come in and change that is hard, which is why in that industry, it's still not sort of penetrated as much. Let's consider a different technology where there are decisions, right? Like I said, finance or medicine, right? A doctor has to decide, okay, what diagnosis do I give this person who's come to me as a patient? So for product managers to think about where to deploy AI, and this is becoming a big challenge. One of the big challenges that industry is facing is that while they're using a lot of AI, they're not getting enough value out of it. They're not getting enough outcomes out of it because they're deploying this technology in the current systems that exist. But the true transformation will happen when systems change, right? Where we move away from rules and we move towards decisions, right? And I'll give you an example, right? I've been thinking about this idea of what a AI first school could look like, right? Where you completely come up with new kinds of situations and rules or decisions for that. And in that kind of scenario, the person who's actually making the biggest decision for a child is not the teacher, is not the school principal, it's the parent. So I would almost create an AI technology that's beneficial for the parent, because the decision making really sits with that person right now, right? So again, just a small thing that I wanted to cover, because you spoke about data and decisions, and this is at least something that this book talks about.
There is a very interesting question that's come from Sohail, and I'm sure you won't be able to answer the whole of it, because actually, Sohail, frankly, the policies around AI are not, out, and certainly what government if India is going to do is totally not clear, at least not that I am aware of. But Sohail wants to know, when training data for AI, he found that the product manager can influence the output. Will India get access to data from maybe Bloomberg or IBM to help build the next phase of AI? Are you aware of any policies that the government of India has come up when working with foreign MNCs?
Not that I am aware of, although I know there's a lot of discussion that's currently happening, and I think there is some expectation of a bill that the ministry is sort of working on. But what's becoming important is that data is becoming important, and ownership of that data is becoming important. So companies that actually have proprietary data for a specific use case, and like you mentioned, Bloomberg, right? One of the reasons Bloomberg was able to come up with an AI solution was because they had all that data. So they may not be open to sharing that data because that's their competitive advantage, right? At the same time, I'm sure there will be use cases, like again, going back to education, there's such a massive use case for open data to be available in education for people to build AI related products in that, right? So it'll depend on industry by industry, but I'm not so sure if data sharing is going to become such an open point, especially keeping this technology in mind.
And not very soon. I think they're all trying to figure out what they're going to do with it. And as you rightly said, anyone who's figured out what to do with it and has a competitive advantage is not going to share it that quickly.
And just so you know, like I feel the aspect of what we call a technical product manager today, right, which is working on platforms and scaling. That's what the definition of a technical product manager is, considering the technologies like social media, cloud, and so on. There's going to be a completely separate opportunity in thinking about data, which is like this person mentioned, which is, could you set up a completely new product or a company just trying to aggregate data? Because data doesn't exist right now to build an AI product with, right? Or could you build products which move data around? Not necessarily the ones on private clouds, but let's say the ones which are slightly open source. So those opportunities will come up where for product managers to think about solutions, keeping this transfer of data, or at least this this aspect of collection of data as a part of the AI stack.
And while we are at this topic and what Sohail raised, I'm just curious to understand, Nikhil, how do you envision, I mean, obviously, MNCs and agencies abroad tend to have a better grip or a handle on this. Or am I wrong in assuming that? And also the interpretation of the kind of data that is being fed into AI, is it coming from everywhere, or is it specific to certain geographies or certain locations? Or, I mean, when you're training AI to sort of, understand or respond, is it happening from anywhere and everywhere, or how does it work?
So again, I guess this is company to company, and I don't have enough knowledge on that specifically. But it goes back to that ownership of the proprietorship, that proprietary data that people have. But obviously, the language models that are currently out there are models that have been trained on literally the entire internet, right? And if you saw that graph on the parameters, so parameters essentially like the human brain has neurons which makes connections and associations. The ability for a similar kind of neuron in the technology to make connections and associations, let's say 20-30 years ago, that number was, I don't know, in the thousands, or maybe tens of thousands. Today that number is about 600 billion. So one of the language models that you're seeing today has 600 billion parameters, right? Which means it's literally been trained on all of the data that's currently there. And this whole aspect of I use AI, and which is being trained on a data and pour it back out into the internet, and that same data gets used by that technology and gets poured out, right? So that's why you're seeing a little bit of things where these technologies are not completely accurate, right? That's what they call hallucinations and so on, where all of the facts and data are not completely true, which is why these are very, very nuanced points. And for a company and a product to really work with customers, it's very high level of trust and very high level of credibility that needs to be built.
We have another question here from Varadmurthy, sorry. It says, will AI build / accelerate product solutions which are in search of a problem? I don't know what SISP means. Do you know what that means?
No, maybe if you can just articulate that, or when you say search.
Can you add that? What SISP, what do you mean by that? If you're still there, Varadmurthy. But meanwhile, what solutions in search of a problem? Oh, interesting. Okay.
Right. So I think here, okay, so let me, okay, actually, I'll come back to that, right? So if you go back to how electricity was invented, right? Electricity was, in fact, let me just share my screen since I've already put this together. It may be a slightly long answer, but I hope it will clarify a few things, right? So, one sec. Okay. So anyway, so this is even though we see so much AI acceleration taking place, etc., the AI jobs only represent a minuscule number right now, right? 2% in the US, 1% of all the jobs that are currently available, 2% are AI jobs, 1% are AI jobs in Canada, and so on, right? Why is this the case? Because it takes time for a general purpose technology to be widely adopted, and this is what we call the between times. And this is what happened with electricity, right? Electricity was invented in about 1880 by Edison. 20 years later, only 3% of US households had electricity, and it took almost 20 years later for that electricity to actually fully be adopted. So where in some ways, in that phase where over the next 10, 12 years, obviously it took 20 years, then it'll probably take 7, 8 years now, or 10 years now, where there will be that sense of mass adoption, right? Which we call the between times. So here, if you thought of a factory 100 years ago, right? Like the way factories were designed at that time was that there was a steam engine which used to create power, right? There was a steam engine at one part of the factory, and all machines were connected to this steam engine through pulleys and like a shaft and so on, right? So the factory looked like a very complicated place, right? The machines had to be very close to the power source and so on and so forth, right? When people started going to these factories and trying to sell electricity, they first said, let's just replace this steam engine with an electric motor, which is what we call point solutions, where they're saying, okay, you just take out the steam engine, we'll put in an electric motor, and that's about it. Which is what's happening today with AI, saying that in your current system, whatever you're currently doing, I will just come with an AI application or an AI point solution and make it more efficient, make it better, and so on, right? While there's value in that, it's not significantly valuable, because there's only so much you can do in the current system, which goes back to that rules versus decisions that I was talking about, right? Then there's something called application solutions, right? Where people said, okay, let's take the electric motor and connect it to a specific machine by itself. So you almost said each machine has its own electric motor, so it doesn't need to be connected to the steam engine, to the larger power source. This is what we call application solutions, and here also we're seeing AI currently in that space. So when you think of a customer service chatbot, or when you think of an AI virtual agent that helps a radiologist, these are individual applications of their own. They have value, but still not as valuable as what we call system level solutions, right? So the real benefit of electricity in a factory context took place when the factory was redesigned, right? When you could actually create factories at multiple levels, you could actually create machines at different parts of the factory. That's the reason why you could actually create that whole assembly line of automobile manufacturing came in. So the real value, I feel, in this whole sort of AI-driven world will be creating system-level solutions, right? Redesigning systems to think about solution. So I think to the person's point on, are we looking at AI as looking for a solution, looking for a problem? In the current system, in some cases, yes, right? Because the system is not designed for decision-making and prediction. So the opportunities that will come up are, can we redesign some of these systems in industries and sort of use that to our advantage?
So that really means that then your product manager's role is not always going to be, or maybe in the next interim, you need product managers who can actually think about redesigning systems to adapt to AI rather than just inventing new things. Is that?
Yes. So if I just go back, I had put down that slide as well. So what does all this mean for product managers, right? So understanding the right use cases where AI will be useful, right? Focusing on areas which are, like I said, decisions versus rules. We spoke about a lot on data. And yes, you're absolutely right. Thinking from a system solutions mindset, as opposed to just a point solution or an application solution mindset, will certainly benefit people in this domain.
So that's almost like another added skill, right? Which is, I mean, you suddenly have to think very differently, because you're no longer just thinking of, just the customer, or, you're also thinking of internally, how do you change things?
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, which is why I spoke about the fact that a PM is essentially an intersection of, let's say, design, technology, and customer or business, whichever way you look at it, right? The need to go deeper into your customer's shoes, understand the industry, go deep into that is going to become very, very critical to unlock value in this space. And that is a skill that the product manager will have to enhance much more than what most people have currently.
Okay, there's a question which has come from Aviral Mittal, wants to know, can you give an example of how you think a system designed for decision making looks like? In what ways does it look different?
Okay, so let's talk about education, right? Like that's the field that I spend a lot of my time in, right? Look at the education system today, and let's look at schools, right? The entire school system was designed 120 years ago. It's still the same. There are so many rules that are in the system. Rule number 1, kids have to go to school Monday to Friday or sometimes Saturday. Rule number 2, kids have to go from 8:30 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Rule number 3, kids have to spend 12 years in school and then graduate. Kids, rule number 4, if you're a certain age, then you are bracketed under a certain grade. Rule number 5, you sit in one class, the teacher from different subjects comes to your class. These are all rules that have been created in our current education system. If I was to think about redesigning the system based on decisions, right? I would first look at where are the decisions currently taking place in the existing system, right? So obviously, I'm not sure how many, because you're limited by curriculum, you're limited by subjects, teachers don't really need to decide what to teach students. That decision making is not a need for them, right? Because you have subjects that are prescribed and so on. The person who has a larger need in the current system are parents, right? Which school should I send my child to? Which subject should I choose in grade 8? Which tutor should I send my child to? When should I do my homework? What level of problem should I work on in maths so I can become better? How should I think about my college? So the decision making is all sitting with the child and the parent, right? So I would think about a system with AI solutions that are designed for them, keeping this current system in mind. But if we were to completely change it, then obviously, if there was a way to empower teachers where kids don't need to go through a structured sort of 12-year process to learn, they could learn on their own. Agencies given to students, teachers become, instead of spending time on content in the classroom, they actually become guides and coaches where kids are learning themselves and they are coming in and mentoring them and so on. So this is just an example where a completely different system on education would look like as compared to what currently exists.
Wow, that's like putting a lot of responsibility on parents and
parents are super responsible. There's so much research to show that kids spend as much time as home, if not more time at home than in school. And so here's the opportunity, right? Parents want to help. They don't know how I should help my child. Do they know so much about the curriculum? Do they know so much about math, physics, chemistry? Do they know so much about, which college I should go to? There's an opportunity sitting right there, designing an AI product, helping the uncertainty in decision making for parents.
Okay, there is a question-ish sort of thing from Siddesh. As of now, PMs are in FOMO to build something with Gen AI to include in product management, which are low-hanging use cases in EdTech for AI product roadmap.
Yeah. So I think you don't have to start thinking about changing the system, right? That's the eventual goal. That will take time. So there is definitely a value in thinking about these point level solutions, which is identifying which point in the current system can you roll out an AI product, right? And there, like I said, I would go and think about where is there most uncertainty in decision making and who are the stakeholders, and is there a real problem to be solved for them, right? And if I'm able to identify that in the current system, in the way things are done, then I would certainly go and attack that. Because I agree, there is a lot of pressure saying everybody's getting into AI, everybody's launching their own chatbot and model. We should also do something. Sure, definitely do.
Are you saying product managers should spend more time understanding how to use what is already existing rather than jump on the bandwagon and create something new?
Understand the current system deeply to know where are the points where these AI related products will actually benefit your users and have value, as opposed to just launching something for the sake of it, right? So just to give you some example, one of the biggest places where AI is being used today is in customer service, right? Because that's an area where there is uncertainty when people reach out saying, I have a problem with a certain service, please help me, and so on. Firstly, there is the technology that's available with these large language models, but that's a space where there's so much disruption possible because there's so much uncertainty. So, I mean, just to give you one example like that, right? Finance, like I said, is a second category, and insurance is a third category, and so on. So, identifying which portions of your current system lend themselves well to having data, to having uncertainty in decision making, where the technology that of these models is currently available, and where you think there's business value, that's the point to attack.
There's an interesting observation, and maybe we could talk a little about that, where, perhaps parents have already played the role of a product manager. This comes from Shivam, who says homeschooling is moving away from the current system of education. So isn't that already a model of, not, I mean, do we really need a product manager to figure out how to empower parents more, especially in education? You can just homeschool your kid, and then there's no need for AI and all of that.
Sure. So I think homeschooling is great, and it shows that there's a larger interest parents are taking in the education of their kids. So how does a parent go about making sense of what to school their kid on, right? I'm assuming it's not an easy approach, right? Where do you find the materials? How do you figure out which material to train your child on or educate your child on? What are the next opportunities you find for them? So I think the use case is more that how do you make that process easier for them? How do you make it seamless for them? So more people can actually homeschool their kids. Maybe right now more people can't homeschool their kids because they don't have a smart system that can help them do it, and they're so obviously then dependent on schools and other places to do it.
I can't see any other questions. Maybe I'll quickly ask you to sum it up and tell us, 2 or 3 things that you think with AI that's sort of coming in, and when everyone's talking, what is it that product managers should really focus on right now? I mean, and don't tell me just from the skills perspective. Is it about reading more? Is it about upskilling? Is it about taking maybe another course? Is it about maybe expanding their knowledge to include understanding of how business works? What would you recommend is the need of the hour for someone who wants to be a product manager, is already one? Or how can they do better?
So I think 3 or 4 things, right? I think first is just understanding the technology at a deeper level, right? I think it is a new technology. It has got lots of nuances. And there's so many new things coming out on an everyday basis. So having a grasp on the core parts of the technology, right? Every technology or everything for that matter has some first principles, right? So going to the root of what the first principles are in your understanding of AI, so that you're able to make sense of all of the scientific material and all of the new technologies that come out, right? I think that would be one thing that I would highly sort of recommend. I think the second thing that I would recommend is just getting hands-on yourself, right? Like just using tools yourself and really understanding which are the ones that you're finding you're benefiting from. I think getting hands-on with the technology will help you kind of accept it and appreciate it and get more interested in it, right? So I think the second thing would certainly be get hands-on with the technology, and it could be with whatever work you're doing, right? It just adds to your level of curiosity and so on, right? I think the third thing would certainly be go back and really understand which are the places where you think this can create value, right? And they're moving out of your comfort zone to again rethink from a first principle standpoint how your current system and industry is functioning, right? And most people haven't done that. They, like product managers in education, have just come in, and they have a brief and they start working, but who's really gone back and spent some time understanding how that system currently works. So I think that's the third thing that I would recommend is, for whichever industry you're in, just go in, and or whichever industry you're solving for, you're working in for your customers, really deeply sort of understand that, right? That's the third thing that I would sort of recommend. I think the fourth thing I would do is, I would certainly upskill myself on sort of on understanding data and design, right? Because those are certainly becoming crucial aspects to roll this technology out. So while you don't need to sort of fully get hands-on with the technology, and that's where the engineers will come in, but a strong understanding of how design is evolving, from a consumer preference standpoint, and of course how to think about data in terms of figuring out location of data, how to move it around and so on. So that would be the fourth. And the last would really be about ethics, right? Like the privacy, ethics, trust considerations that any sort of product needs to have. Being able to think about that deeply, I think would be important. So that's more of, so obviously not necessarily a skill, but more knowledge.
All right. So, I mean, considering a program like AMP, where does that fit in? Would it fit in anywhere for product managers who are sort of looking to upskill at all? Or is it all going to be only learning about AI? And there is someone who put in a question saying, where are there any courses for PMs on AI?
Yeah.
Which I'm assuming they're looking for technical courses completely.
Not necessarily, but not necessarily technical courses as much as how do you use the technology, right? So it's more like using a tool. So like you would use Figma, or like you would use any other sort of data related tool. There's so many AI tools there. So courses to help you use tools as much as know the technology, I think would be relevant, right? I think the AMP program is great because it really equips you with a very strong foundation on the aspect of thinking, right? The first principles aspect that I was talking about, both from understanding industries, understanding in some ways the technology, and understanding how to think about customers. So the muscle on thinking and having a system solution mindset is really where I think the AMP program will significantly help. You'll almost come out with a certain point of view about how to think about products with AI or without AI, and that has a very premium in the industry today, as opposed to just kind of doing things that you're meant to do or you have to do, as opposed to having a point of view and a far-fetched view on that. So I think that's the muscle that the AMP will be able to build.
All right. So with that, I'm not sure. Oh, there's a very there's a comment from Java. It's a very nice technical discussion. Kindly, we have such awareness session on implementation of AI in various software companies. We are finding news, a lot of job loss due to implementation of AI. And if one company follows implementation of AI machine for any task, other companies also follow. But really, the AI will not bring profit after a particular. Therefore, instead of cutting jobs, AI can be implemented to monitor the error, which will save jobs and improve output, which can be provided if we use AI, not by cutting. Okay, this is just an opinion, but interesting. But maybe you can comment on this. But Java, that's what we are trying to say, that ultimately companies will follow, because that is the trend. That is something that's happening in the market today. You can, sort of, what should I say, future-proof yourself by really developing the muscle that will help you to stay above the, or ahead of the curve. Nikhil, you want to add something?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. I think the point that it's not able to fully add profit right now is because it's in the current system, right? Which is why thinking about what a new system could look like with this technology is going to be critical. I feel like the other sort of skill that's going to matter is, really deeply thinking about problems, right? Like Einstein had this fantastic quote where if you give me 60 minutes to think about a solution, I'd spend 59 or 55 minutes thinking about the problem, right? So I think defining the problem, thinking about prioritizing, execution, those things, the ability to think about problems is going to be critical, and then sort of deploying this technology in different. I think PMs are, like, in some ways they will be guardians of this technology, because they're going to be making decisions on where to implement this technology. It's not a small thing that we're talking about, right? As a product manager, you're going to be almost deciding, hey, am I going to roll this technology out here? What data am I going to use? How am I going to think about ethics? So we're in a pretty interesting moment, and like it's the opportunity for PMs to step up and have a point of view for how to think about using this technology in the right way for industry and society.
It's also about being able to actually articulate whether or not your organization has that problem. It's really about defining the problem correctly and then jumping into a solution. 99% of the time, most PMs and most managers, senior managers included, don't have the skill to define a problem and then work towards a solution. We're all jumping to sort of get to the solution. And right now, it seems like AI is the only solution available. And as an educator, Nikhil will agree with that. I think we're also used to putting our hand up first, which is really jumping to the answer, that we often don't hear the question or understand the question very well or define the problem very well. And I think that's where AMP comes in, because we do spend a lot of time in our leadership track on actually helping you to learn how to first define a problem. We don't spend time on teaching you how to implement a solution. We actually spend a time on defining, structuring, understanding how to make a decision before you actually get down to presenting your solution. All right. With that, I know, Nikhil, we went a little bit over time, but thank you so much. It was lovely to have everyone. Good, interesting discussion. And I also went back with some thoughts that I didn't know earlier. I'd really want to say thank you, and do look out for us. The Accelerated Management Program is recruiting for its 4th cohort, and we've got Nikhil to come and do lots and lots of interesting sessions like this. And we'll take it from there. Thank you so much, Nikhil.